So without further ado, Chief Rex Troche, welcome on behalf of DSCA. We know you're amongst the busiest people in town. You brought with two Sarasota's finest, and we appreciate their participation too. Interim Chief Troche began his career in the police department, as I understand, in 2002. He served in all 4 divisions. So here's a fellow who knows every side of police work in Sarasota. He was promoted to sergeant in 2013, lieutenant in 2017. And he has a number of degrees, including a master's degree in emergency management from St. Louis University. He was appointed to captain in 2020. One thing, sir, not on your bio is I think you spend a fair amount of time at the gym.
Yes,
sir. So that's not on your bio, but it's pretty obvious. With this said, I've asked Rex to make some introductory remarks. He knows from meeting with members of his staff that some of the key interests of downtown are noise, whether it be amplified or vehicular, and also the vagrancy and homelessness matter. So our organization would like to think of itself as representing about 12,000 people in the greater downtown, which is roughly 20% of the whole city. So without further ado, we can make some remarks, and then we'll likely have some questions from the board for you, sir.
Sure, absolutely. So thank you for having all of us here. Just a quick history note. I was in this building when it was first being built, and I think I worked an off-duty detail here for 12 hours, making sure it was secure because I don't think they could lock the doors. We had to handcuff them at night because of builders coming in, contractors coming in and out. I am from the city of Chicago. I grew up in the city of Chicago. My father was one of the first Puerto Rican police officers to be hired in 1962 by Chicago Police Department under O.W. Wilson, who was a commissioner at that time. So I grew up in the inner city to the point where when I would go to school, my father would have to pick up my clothes to make sure that they were not gang colors, Latin Kings, Gaylords, things of that nature I had to deal with. I was either getting chased by them, to get beat in or beat up by a new member that they were bringing in. So my whole life, I've had to run from some things. And then what that taught me was how to use my words, because over there, you have to learn how to speak or you're not getting out of it. Unfortunately, when I was 11, my brother was brutally murdered in Chicago, actually in Rockford, Illinois. So once that happened, it changed my whole family dynamic. And then my parents were pretty much, we need to get you out of here. This is not a good place for you anymore. So about 2 years later, my dad retired after 24 years. Usually the magic number is 25 years, but he felt it was time for us to get out of there. So came down to St. Pete. Grew up in South St. Pete from the age of 14 on. So it was an interesting dynamic because here in the city of Chicago, I grew up in the United Nations. In my opinion, my friends were Jewish, Yugoslavian, Polish, Italian, Puerto Ricans, Dominican. So to me, a broad palette of colors was normal for me, right? I would go to these bat mitzvahs and I would go to these special Yugoslavian celebrations, and that was normal for me. So to come down to South St. Pete was a bit of a culture shock because in South St. Pete, you're either black or you're white. That was really what it boiled down to. Thankfully, I went to Lakewood High School, which you had it was almost 50-50 black to white, but the people there were beautiful. The students just got along. They all grew up together. So it was an interesting dynamic there. And then I went to University of South Florida, got my undergrad, and later got my graduate degree from St. Leo University. My father really tried to talk me out of law enforcement. He didn't feel it was safe for me, but I had an older brother, the middle brother. He became a Chicago police officer. When I was 20, he took me on a ride along and threw me in the back seat of an unmarked car. He worked in an area called Humboldt Park. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Chicago. And so right out the gate, him and his partner took this kid, threw him against a car. I mean, went through his pockets, threw him in the back seat with me. I had no clue what was going on. He's crying, I'm crying. I mean, it was bad. And then they subsequently let him go. And then the next stop, they picked up a gentleman who was trying to pick up a prostitute. and they rolled up and it was a deer in the headlights. They put her in the car. She had her molars just recently pulled, so she had like this big wad of gauze everywhere, and it was just so I came back and I decided I did not want to. I made that decision because I didn't like the way my brother necessarily was doing law enforcement. That's not what was me. That wasn't my intrinsic motivation. So later on in college, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I realized that even though my brother was on America's Most Wanted, not because he was wanted, but because he was catching bad guys, that it was not the type of police officer I wanted to be. So I determined at that point that I can be my own person and I can bring my own ideas to the table. That's my personality, because when it comes from inside, right, then it's real and it's genuine. So we think that's very important. So got my master's degree, and like David said, I've rose through the ranks. I've done everything here. And I want to make a point of that because I did foot patrol here. I did work downtown, and there's a lot of pride that goes. And, you know, Mr. Vermillion's over there. He's a former Sarasota police officer and did a great job with us, by the way.
Thank you.
And I mean that. And so I had a pride walking downtown, because if someone was victimized downtown, I took it personally, because I wanted families and I wanted tourists to come down here and feel safe downtown. I wanted them to know they can enjoy themselves and not live in fear. So that has been a big point of contention throughout my whole career, is to protect downtown, to protect St. Armand's, places like that, really interesting, cool places. And I say that, and I worked in Newtown as well, and my heart breaks in Newtown because it has so much potential. But there are some challenges with the socio and economic challenges that, you know, when you're poor and you don't have money, then that breeds crime, because you're going to go for the quick buck. So it's very important that we all continue to support Newtown, and I think we are. I think it is starting to get better. I think we've reached out to Newtown because we've all been here for a long time. We've been able to leverage that with our relationships with the Judson Grimes, the Willie Shaws, the Kelvin Lumpkins, the Trevor Harveys, and Carolyn Masons, and we've built a really positive network there. And so we have an operation that's going on right now, and we're seeing results like you wouldn't believe. We're at 14 firearms that we pulled off the street in less than 3 weeks. And that's just by being visible and being proactive. So rewind a little bit. When I was the deputy chief here, and Chief Reeser was the chief here, and he kind of oversaw the downtown, was special to him. And then when I became the chief, we went into these meetings about unsheltered. And so I decided, you know, I'm gonna walk downtown. It's been a while, and I saw people laying on the pavers. I'm like asking the downtown beats. I'm like, what is this? And they're like, well, they can sleep there. I go, what, Sweden? So there's no Sweden here. So what I did immediately was pull in our city attorney and say, get in my truck, let's go. And we went for a walk. And I go, legal or illegal? Legal or illegal? And sometimes he's like, I don't know. And my answer to him would be, well, if you don't know, how are the officers supposed to know? You're supposed to be the expert in arguing these. And if the officers can't even get probable cause, how are we supposed to get to beyond a reasonable doubt? So that's when we started working a plan. And I think it got better because we got more training for the officers. We started using examples. We started taking photos. Hey, is this a violation? Is this not a violation? So I think downtown has gotten better in that regard. It's never going to be perfect. It really isn't ever going to be perfect. Because like I said earlier, if you and I could figure out how to make this perfect, we'd be millionaires. Because San Francisco would be calling us, LA would be calling us, Chicago would be calling us, New York would be calling us. Now, having said that, because I did grow up in Chicago and I did see the proliferation of gangs and gang violence, one thing I'm very big on is getting on it. Because what I saw there was, it was allowed. And because it was allowed, it grew. So when we had MS-13 start to grow here about 10, 12 years ago, I got into the whole gang violence deal. I got into gang mode because I knew if we could stop it immediately, it would go away. Now, are there more things that we can do for unsheltered? Absolutely. There are more things that we can do. Do I think it's ever going to go away? I don't think it's ever going to go away. And quite frankly, this is a reason why. We have one of the largest Salvation Armies in Southwest Florida right here. Good, bad, or indifferent. That's just a fact. you're always going to have people on the periphery who want to eat, maybe get some clothes, but don't want to partake in services. Now, the officers do a great job. I have a sergeant here. He does a great job in making sure they get offered services, but we can't make them take services. So we have the educate part, we have the encourage part, and then we have the enforcement part, and we're starting to do the enforcement part. And we are starting to do some operations as well with respect to going out and making sure that, yes, you're homeless doesn't mean you can do drugs on the street. Okay, so those are things, and we're very active on that. But again, is it ever going to be perfect? It's not ever going to be perfect. Can we do better? Absolutely, and I'm all for that. The next hot topic, the noise. Trust me. Trust me. This DBC, DBA, decibels time, it is, again, attorneys have issues reading and understanding some of these things, right? And, you know, was the machine calibrated? When was it calibrated? Are you certified? Have you been recertified? You know your certification is running out. Those are challenges that we have to run into with respect to personnel. So I know St. Pete's gone to plainly audible. I know we have a variation of that with respect to vehicles, and it has worked. So I know that's coming up. So what I would say to that is, and I would just ask everybody in here that if you have a concern or you have input, now's your time. March 7th is the time to show up to that commission meeting and let them know what you think and how you want it done. But you have to be that voice, because we as law enforcement, obviously, we're not the legislation. We're not the legislative arm for this. We're not writing these laws. We're enforcing these laws. And I have some consternation when we have certain laws on the books, but there's not enough clarity. And I don't want to put our officers in a bad situation where they can be a lawsuit can be filed against them. I want my people to know that we stand behind it 100% and there's clarity there. So we're working on that as well. So my ask is show up for March 7th, definitely. Let your voices be heard. And with respect to unsheltered, I know we're working on another ordinance in regards to the sit, lay, lie, I believe it's called. And so we've been documenting through our body worn cameras. Anytime we're noticing that, we're actually snapping a photo with that. And then we're building essentially a book so that Mr. Fournier can move forward with that easier. So with that said, does anybody have any questions for me?
Yeah, as far as questions go, folks, let's start with our board members, and possibly there may be time for others to wait. But, who would like to lead it off? Bob?
Yeah, I have a question. I live here, and we have some amplified music on Coconut that shows up from time to time. It's gotten a lot better. We work with the local CAT team. I think Sergeant Luciano. So the question is, amplified music, if it's past the property line, isn't that a description of something that is illegal, versus having a decibel meter or whatever? But if you could stand at the bridge in Pioneer Park and you can listen to that music really blasting at you, it's well past their property line. Is there anything we could do about that with the current statutes, the way they read?
So I think we're back to what we're talking about with respect to amplified sound, and there's different variations, right? There's the one that resonates, there's the one that's constant, there's the one that's from the vehicle, there's one from a speaker. That's where we're getting confused. And I think that's why it's important to show up for the March 7th meeting, because it needs to be very simple. I love, personally, since you asked, plainly audible from 50 feet. I love that one. That's simple. It's common sense. So when we start trying to figure out, well, what is the definition of that device that's coming from? Is it a repeat noise? Oh, is it a speaker? It starts to get really blurry. So we have been doing some operations in Pioneer Park, not just CAT, but some other units that I won't say are working that area, and it has been working out pretty well. So
I can tell you the difference in Pioneer Park. I've been here since 2007, so I was one of the first residents here. The improvement there is just incredible.
Yeah, and we have this word called squeaky wheel, and some people get mad when you say it, but I use it all the time. Continue to be that wheel that needs a little grease, the squeaky wheel, because if you're not, then there's so many things that are going on. This isn't a town anymore. This is a city. This is a city. The population's here. And if people don't think the population's here, well, then let's bring in the population of Bradenton that comes here, and the population of Northport that comes here, and Venice. This is the hub where everybody comes to live, play, and work. So you got to be a squeaky wheel.
Thank you. Clark.
I live at 1350 and we face Main Street. And I guess it was a couple of Saturdays ago when there was a group of car owners who had left their mufflers at home or found the specialist. And I gather they had organized at
Marina
Jack's. But we got the noise from the Palm Avenue garage. We've been downtown since 2007, and we've never heard anything like this. And they went around and around and all got together at the top. There were 6 of them at that point, and I didn't have a number for the police department other than 911. So I called, and actually the person who was monitoring the garage in the golf cart followed these guys up and had a conversation. I left my name, but I didn't say I needed a call back. I just wanted to have someone come down and maybe do something. I don't know if anyone ever showed up or not.
Have they returned since?
No.
So I think that's a one-off. Some of these cars.
Is that a group? Is that a gang? I mean, are they?
I don't know. I wouldn't say a gang. It might be a social car lover group, or I'm sorry, social muffler lover group. It might be that. Maybe it's what I call a one-off. They picked Sarasota, maybe they pick Tampa next time to meet in St. Pete. They probably go eat lunch, go for a drive around. Now, one of the things I'll say, since we've had a transition in the traffic court judges, we did meet with the new one with respect to loud mufflers. Well, the first judge had a very liberal understanding. Hey, if you get by in the store, it's not aftermarket. Well, the second judge doesn't agree with that. So we're going with the second judge. So we've done a lot of traffic near the bridge, near all the construction. We did receive a grant to pay overtime for our traffic officers to do that, or even any other officers. So part of the challenge is for me as personnel with respect to that, because I think there was some delay getting there because dispatch held that call for a little bit. Dispatch doesn't work for us. Dispatch works for the sheriff's office. So I get a lot of emails about dispatch. So if anybody in here can just tell people, they work for the sheriff's office. Okay. We gave up our dispatch many, many, many years ago, and we contract out to the sheriff's office. So on that particular day, my understanding is they held that for a bit because we were busy. Because we prioritize calls, right? Burglary in progress, aggravated assault, battery, et cetera. Those are going to get higher priority. But since then, we've got a better understanding now of the muffler law, and I think we're going to get the support from the judges. Now, I will touch on another topic in regards to that. One of our challenges is we're doing our job, right? We're doing our job, they're doing their job, and they're doing a phenomenal job. And they're like a sponge. I take them and I ring them, and I ring them and I ring them and I ring them so I can get everything out of them. And it's terrible. And I shouldn't do that, but I have to do that, right? So I know they're doing their job. But some of the challenges is we're looking at the numbers with respect to felony charges, misdemeanor charges. We're putting those on people. But when we start looking at convictions, those are falling short. So you hear, we're not tough enough on crime as a nation. We're kind of not in regard. We just did this operation and we're pulling all the data. So we put together numbers all the time. And out of the 41 arrests, those people have a total of over 650 felonies committed. Okay. Now, out of that number, only 87 have been convicted. So those have gone through, they were found guilty on, out of 650, 87. That's like a 13% conviction rate. There's a problem. There's a problem. It's not on us. They go in the jail. We literally, it was a Monday, we arrested somebody with possession of 2 pounds of marijuana. And on Tuesday, we rearrested them again for selling marijuana again. So there's a problem. There's a disconnect. So since then, I've gotten with the state attorney at Brodsky. We've had a good talk about it. So we're trying to ensure that the enforcement is working, but we need to make sure that the attorney's the state attorney and is working with respect to convictions. And if there's an issue as far as our job that we're not doing enough on the investigations, that needs to be conveyed to us so that we can do a better job at that. So I have a great relationship with Ed, great communication. I think we're going to do better on that.
Peter,
I'd like to get your perspective, Chief, on an issue around the homeless. We have a committee on homeless here, and we work, really appreciate the 3E program, the educate, encourage, enforcement. And just get your perspective as to how we could help you a little bit more in that, especially on the enforcement. I see your offices, you know, they talk to these people, especially the downtown offices, know the people, know who's new on the corner, who isn't new on the corner. I get the partnership crime reports, incident reports, because it's more than just crimes. There's warrants, but there's also loitering and these kinds of things. And it seems that you can educate and encourage, but I hear from a lot of residents that I don't think there's any enforcement going on. And, you know, we've worked with Judge Quatermain and her comprehensive court and the mental health court and so forth. What's your perspective on residents being able to do more to help you out with the homeless situation?
Well, I can tell you we are doing the enforcement part for sure. And we've been more active in that as well. And we've been taking resources and moving them around. And again, when I talk about the sponge and the squeezing, I squeeze the sponge, right? I really
we're
do.
squeezed.
And I put a lot on them because, you know, my job as the chief is to be much like a CEO or a CFO or a COO. I'm a visionary. I want to get it done. Here's the deal. I don't care about the minutia within, but we need to get from A to B, make it happen. And then I have people that they get on that. So I do push them a lot.
I just have if I could just interject here. I have a clarification if you could help me with, and then just 2 questions. I'll put them out to you and then you can answer them. You had briefly mentioned your officers have an app, or are they're taking pictures or submitting something. If you could just clarify, maybe I misheard that, pictures that they're taking regarding the sit and lie ordinance. And the other 2 questions I have, and you can answer them. One of them is, do you feel that the police presence or your staff in the downtown match the population density that we have? And do you see that fluxing at all? And the other one is, what do you see, or what do you feel that is the biggest challenge that your police officers face right now regarding enforcement, on the enforcement side?
Chief, I hope you followed that.
Yeah, I didn't follow, but
okay.
let me finish answering.
Yeah.
Kathy, I'll be right with you because I wasn't quite
No,
done
that's
here. So
oh, okay.
the answer to your question is, and it's going to hurt for me to say this, but you got to stop giving people money. We're enabling them, and it hurts my heart as an Episcopalian, you know, a God-fearing person. I get it. It's a tough deal, but they're going to continue to come here. If there's a resource for them to have, then they're going to continue on Main Street. So that's my short.
Okay. And Kathy, by the way, is a board member living in the Mark.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah, the app. I was gonna just.
I may have it. I think I may have it. So when I talked about them taking photos, they're using their body worn cameras to document that incident. And then that is on what we call our evidence.com. And then our city attorney is able to look for a specific code that we invented for that. I believe it's called 30-3. And then if they put 30-3, and then all those videos with respect to that violation will come up.
Okay, so that is what I think is probably going to be shored up a little bit, I hope, with some of the ordinances that they're looking at that might help with clarification on some of that. But my other thing was, do you think that the police presence in the downtown area matches the population density that we have compared to the city in general?
No, I don't. And so there's some things in the works on that. One thing I tell the deputy city manager every time I meet him, which is twice a week, which is Pat Robinson, I open up with, I need more personnel. I need more personnel. I need more personnel. So I think that is in the works with respect to increasing officers downtown. But this is what we all need to remember, right? This type of job, I can't just bring somebody on in 2 weeks and they're on the street. We're talking a year process, if not a year and a half, before an officer is functional as a solo officer. So that's why it's important for governments to really stay ahead of this and to foresee it and forecast it before it happens, because then you're behind the 8 ball and it takes you a bit of time.
Okay, thank you. Patrick.
If I could just, one last question here regarding traffic. Patrick and I live up to Condo on the Bay, which is at the west end of Boulevard of the Arts. So we have to cross 41 to go pretty much anywhere. And whether it's on car or foot. And a lot of times on foot, since we're being encouraged as a more walkable city, crossing 41 or crossing Fruitville is dangerous when cars do not stop behind the stop lines. And therefore they end up parking or stopping in the middle of the intersection and usually in the middle of the crosswalks. And we have signs that says, don't block blocks. What can the officers do to enforce that? Or are they allowed to write tickets when somebody is seen in the car in the middle of the intersection?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's obstructing the intersection. Absolutely. So this goes back to, we have an issue there. We have an issue down at the Circle. We have an issue at Coconut. We have an issue on Central. We have an issue down on Magnolia, down on 41, where people are crossing over from Osprey over 41, cutting through the neighborhood. We have an issue out east on Fruitville and Geneva. I have a 6-person traffic unit, and not only are they a traffic unit, but they're also our traffic homicide investigators. So if they have a call out at 2 in the morning, they're going to work that for 2 days. And then the traffic unit's kind of broken up because each one has a different job with respect to that investigation. So again, we have this increase in population and we can see it. I mean, people can say we're 56,000 people. I don't believe it. They can say it, but I can tell you with the amount of cars and traffic I see out there, that can't make sense. It's not making sense. So yes, we need to do a better job at it. We need to look at other ways of traffic calming in order to stop that. But another problem is, and I just experienced the other day when I went and saw my daughter play at University of Central Florida, was I'm looking at this Google thing and it's telling me to turn left, but this lane, there's no lane to turn left. And now I'm like halfway in, halfway out. I got people behind me. And we have to realize too that we have a lot of tourists that come here from other countries, from other states. They don't know their way around. So they're struggling too. And when they're relying on these maps that don't make sense because the traffic pattern keeps switching, there's a challenge there. So I think there needs to be some grace on our part, but I'm also a big fan of walking bridges. Like, why don't we look into walking bridges, a bridge that goes over 41? That's going to cost probably about, I may have looked into it, maybe $2 million. But I think walking bridges are important because you mentioned earlier, I have a master's degree in emergency management. Well, there's a saying in emergency management where you don't see the green until you see the red. And so why wait for something to happen? Why don't we just get ahead of it and we put in some walking bridges? I think that would be a really good project.
I think we might have some answers with our transportation committee headed by Roger Barry up there. We've gone round and round on walking bridges, and we might not have the same perspective as you do on that, but be a good topic, Roger, to sit down and talk about.
Let's set a time and talk about it one day for sure. I would love to hear the comments.
One question that I recall at an October City Commission meeting was there was a question about how many citations have been issued related to a sit and lie, as I recall. And there was some discrepancy between Mr. Fournier's records and maybe your records. Have you begun in that 5 months period to try and capture data so we can look at trends? How is that? How are you doing that differently than you might have been?
So I'm going to get a confirmation on this, and then you can tell me if I'm right. I think I'm right. So when it comes to the warning, when we give the warning, hey, you need to pick up and leave, people tell us, okay, right? Am I right?
That is correct.
Have we written one?
Because we don't have supply. Right now we have 30-3.
Right.
Which every time we encounter somebody, even if we've encountered them before doing the same thing, we have to again warn them. So every time a reasonable person, 99.9% of the time is going to say, yes, sir, I'll move. And that's sometimes why you don't see enforcement is you have to warn them, they comply, they do.
Have we written one?
Halfway down the block.
Have we written one? So here's the challenge. Here's the challenge. And this is what kind of, we went back and forth on this and then I was over it. I don't understand if I say, hey, Jamie, you're blocking the sidewalk. We're in front of 1511 Main Street. There is an ordinance that you can't do that. And I read her the ordinance and I say, you know, if I find you in violation of that again, I'm going to cite you. Well, the direction we've been given is, okay, Jamie says, okay, I'm going to move. But then she goes to 1515, literally a building over and does the same thing. We have to warn her again. So it comes down to, I argued and I thought, well, if it's on Main Street, it's on Main Street. That should cover it. But, you know, we get into these games where we're splitting hairs so much, it just becomes very frustrating. So I would say, so to answer your question, the officers, like I said earlier, when they do see somebody in that position, they are snapping that information. It is being recorded and documented, and that is the data that Mr. Fournier is going to use.
Okay, so you're capturing things
Yes.
differently
Yes.
than you might have been 5 months. So there's
Yes.
more of a trend line on this. Okay.
I didn't understand, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go
No,
ahead.
because that's,
If you're continuing.
I didn't understand we have to warn them again. What's the have to part?
I didn't understand it either.
Oh, that's the direction you've been given. You have to warn them again.
Direction we
How
didn't
many
get.
warnings do you have to give them before you?
They each place is a do-over. They get a new do-over at each.
Oh, because the
location.
address changed, it's a
Yes,
new
sir.
one?
And they all understand that. So,
And they know the game.
So if I'm speeding on Tamiami at the 500 block and you're nice enough to give me a warning and I speed at the 700 block, you're gonna warn me again?
No, I'm getting you on that one. I'm getting you on that one. That's different.
All right.
But, you know, again, we're in this new realm of this vehicle that we're trying to use. And so there's discussion with myself and the city attorneys and whatnot, and they think this is the best, safest way to do it. And I have to lean on them because that's what they do. That's their job. Their job is to protect the police department and the city.
Okay. And Jamie,
Yes.
you had a question. I'm afraid folks were about going to have to wrap it up.
Okay. There's one thing the downtown residents could do to help you guys. What would it be?
So I would say, you know, support the people in blue. You know, that's what I would say. Say, and a lot of y'all do it now, right? You say thank you. They get lunches some of the time. People do that. It's very generous for them. But at the end of the day, we just want to know that we're supported, right? Because there's this old cliche saying, right? The community are the police and the police are the community. And that is true because without you and without your support, we can't do what we're doing. But we have to know that we're supported, and if an officer makes a mistake or we're in this really gray line, that the community is not going to turn. Because I can tell you that everything they do is with best intention. Because if their intentions weren't good, I would make sure they're not part of our agency. That's my job to make sure. But these two right here are very special people. They do a lot of things for other people outside of here, but that's the kind of people that we hire. So to answer that, just, you know, support the blue, support the green, just support us and let me walk.
And you've encouraged us to show up or write on the 7th. And I know that is underway. And we would just encourage you to the extent possible that you make known what you need to do your job even better. In a
Yes.
compassionate but reasonable way. So
It's like parenting, right? Being compassionate but firm, right? And so, yeah, I encourage everybody to show up for March 7th. Please make your voices heard. And then we'll move forward from there. And at the end of the day, we're going to do whatever guidelines or the ordinance says or laws. That's how we're going to move forward.
Can I ask you a question?
just very, very quick, Ted.
It was either 2019 or I went through the police academy.
Mhm.
Do you still have that?
So we still have it, but we had to suspend it due to COVID.
That's one of the things that we could, everybody go through that police academy that I went through. It was phenomenal.
We're going to do it.
And I learned about the police problems and that would do more, I think, to help.
We're definitely gonna do it.
Okay. All right, listen.
Does he want one more? I feel bad.
This will be the third time I got shut down.
All right, go for it. 3 strikes and you're in.
We never have enough time for the audience. Real question, how do you measure or define clearly audible? Let's say it's 50 feet. The restaurants will argue 100 feet. What is clearly audible? I have
So,
excellent hearing.
yeah,
Some people don't.
That's a great question. And I just had this discussion with an attorney in my office literally 2 hours ago. And I said, hey, you'll roll up and you'll think, wow, that's really bad. And I could roll up and I could be salsa dancing as I roll up going, wow, that's really good. So there's going to have to be some training with respect to that. There's going to have to be training. It is so subjective because not everyone's going to agree in this room if the stereo by the pool over here is loud or not. So there's going to be a degree of training. There's never going to be a perfect system.
Well, clearly subjective sounds like it's at risk of being thrown out because it is so subjective and it's not measured.
Well, I think one of the keys is going to
It's
be
like saying you saw a guy who was going really fast on the bridge, but you don't know how.
right. But I think the difference here is we're going to have body worn camera.
Oh, okay.
All the officers have
And you
body
have
worn
volume
camera.
on it? That has sound on it?
Oh yeah, it's got amazing sound on it.
All right.
So that is going to we call the third person in the room when we have the body worn camera, which on any contact that we have with people, we have to turn on our
All
camera.
right, I promised a short answer.
Okay, well, thank you again.